So now that Hezbollah has been decimated, what will Iran do? In the name of that Iran is at risk, the leadership of Iran could be attacked. This definitely has rattled the government in Iran, the leadership in Iran, and that this could happen to them as well. As Israel has demonstrated that it knew where Hania was, the Hamas leader in Tehran, and to attack it. Proxies, it's lost some credibility with the proxies and in the region also, because it has allowed the decimation of its proxies. It has threatened to use force. Netanyahu, you're right, has gained popularity, and he has been steadfast in terms of pushing to decimate both Hamas and Hezbollah. Their capability. So there is a lot at stake here, and I think Israel, as well as the United States and others, have to think about the various courses of action that might be available to the different sides, and their intended and unintended consequences. So we are at an inflection.
This is an India Today Global exclusive. I'm being joined by Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad, who has been the US Ambassador to Iraq, to the UN, and to Afghanistan, also Special Envoy to the AFPAC region. Thank you so much, Ambassador Khalilzad, for joining us here on India Today Global. This is a very important juncture that that the world is at. Israel at war with not just the Hamas, but also now has opened up various fronts. In your assessment, Ambassador, how do you see this entire war pan out, not just for Israel, but also for the international community that is seeking a ceasefire?
I think you're right that this is a very important juncture. Both Israel and particularly Iran face important options and choices that will have potentially far-reaching consequences. Israel has had a major success, intelligence success mostly, in recent times in going after Hezbollah, which has been an important partner of Iran, not only for advancing its regional interests, which has predominantly has been how it can be the dominant power in West Asia, in the Middle East, but also to deter Israel from attacking Iran by having a force with a lot of missile capability that could threaten Israeli homeland. So now that Hezbollah has been decimated, what will Iran do, and what would Israel do, given its a stronger position compared to a few weeks ago with the changes that have occurred?
The big question over here is Iran's dilemma, and we'll talk about that. But before that, let's talk about Israel. Ambassador Khalilzad, do you think that what has happened so far is being considered Israel's success, but do you think that will last, or should there be retaliation from various fronts does Israel stand to lose more in the future?
Well, that's one of the most important questions. Israel has established, in my judgment, a strong deterrence by what it has done. What would Iran do? I think the Iranians, which is the other major player that shapes the responses of others as well, like the Houthis, Hezbollah, and to a certain extent, even Hamas, would Iran, is it going to be focused now more about its own survival of the leadership? Will Israel go after them? They might worry. So, or will it do something else? I'm sure in Tehran they are looking at various options, besides very focused on protecting the leadership of Iran itself, and the options could include what sort of immediate responses, but I think it will also probably include longer-term options, given that if Hezbollah is decimated, is unlikely to be able to regroup to present the kind of threat that it did just a few weeks ago or a few days ago. Might it reconsider or accelerate Iran, for example, its nuclear posture, if it feels that now it's vulnerable to an Israeli attack? How does it sort of deal with it in the short term, but in the long term, it may re-examine its nuclear program and might accelerate its nuclear capability. So there is a lot at stake here, and I think Israel, as well as the United States and others, have to think about the various courses of action that might be available to the different sides, and their intended and unintended consequences. So we are at an inflection point for the region.
Okay. You've actually picked up a lot of points, so let's just take it one by one. Let's talk about not Israel's success, but Israel's options over here and the vulnerabilities. While we see Israel looks quite strong and strengthened with the kind of actions it has taken, is there a reason to fear that Netanyahu, for now, might be gaining popularity, but is there fear that the West, particularly the United States of America, at any given point in time after November 5th, should Kamala Harris come to power, lose out on DC's support? And what happens then?
Well, Netanyahu, you're right, has gained popularity, and he has been steadfast in terms of pushing to decimate both Hamas and Hezbollah. But the Palestinian problem is not going to go away. The question is what to do there for the next administration. What is the plan for the Palestinians? And right now we have with President Biden, he's almost like a caretaker administration. Everyone knows that he's not going to be in power in a few months. So the policy of the next president will be very important. But besides the issue of Palestine, there is the importance of what to do with the consequences of what has happened, which is Iran, Israel, and then the broader Middle East architecture. These are intertwined with each other. And I think we all thought that Asia will be the focus of the next administration. But now you have two crises, one in the Middle East, which can escalate, and some big decisions could be made by the leaders there, such as I alluded to, Iran's in its very careful. Iran is a very calculating regime or government. They are in their calculations and assessments. If they go for accelerating getting to a nuclear weapon capability, in order to, in the name of that Iran is at risk, the leadership of Iran could be attacked, that it has lost the role that Hezbollah in that calculation played, that it put Israel's cities at risk by the missiles that they had. So the administration has to sharply, the new one will focus on that. And there is a risk of escalation in Ukraine. Again, nuclear weapons are potentially in play. You hear a lot about the change in Russian nuclear doctrine in the last few days. So it is a situation in which reality seems to be moving in a direction where the Middle East and Europe is likely to be the focus of the attention on an urgent basis.
Right. Ambassador Khalilzad, let's just focus on Iran then. You spoke about Iran's reluctance and the fact that after the kind of attacks we've seen, Ismail Hania being assassinated on Iranian soil, Hassan Nasrallah killed well within Lebanon, and we're looking at the top commanders of Hezbollah absolutely decimated, the leadership destroyed. In such a scenario, one, is Iran rattled? We did hear reports of the supreme leader being moved to a safe house. Are they rattled with the strategy of Israel to assassinate leadership of these various fronts, which now also includes Iran?
Yeah. Well, I think that this is one of the major developments, which is that Israel has demonstrated that it has the intelligence to locate. It did it with regard to Hezbollah, certainly. And that has been a breakthrough. We don't know exactly how that has happened. Various theories are around. And then to be able to target precisely or relatively precisely to eliminate or degrade that target. This definitely has rattled the government in Iran, the leadership in Iran, and that this could happen to them as well. As Israel has demonstrated that it knew where Hania was, the Hamas leader in Tehran, and to attack it. So therefore, I think their priority right now is likely to be, how do we make sure this doesn't happen to them right now? Survival, if you like, or overcoming this, reducing the vulnerability through whatever various options that they may have available to them, but they couldn't be sure. So that's the immediate, the urgent issue, in my view, for Iran. Second is more issues of what to do about this in terms of its proxies. It's lost some credibility with the proxies and in the region also, because it has allowed the decimation of its proxies. It has threatened to use force, has not done it. And there is also reports that the intelligence about these Hezbollah may have come from an Iranian source.
Exactly. I was just going to ask you, because, you know, losing credibility over here is one thing, but having penetration in terms of intelligence into the Iranian ecosystem that helps get Hassan Nasrallah, I mean, nothing can be worse than that.
Of course. We don't know for sure what has happened, but there are various theories. Iran may have better information than we do as to what has happened and why it happened. So the question is, given the huge implications, including that Hezbollah was part of Iran's deterrence and defense of itself, that it was like placing, well, to some extent, what it's not a good analogy, the Soviets putting missiles in Cuba to threaten the United States from nearby to deter the U.S. from doing certain things in Europe. We did not stand for that, and you had the Cuban Missile Crisis and the way it resolved itself. Iran now must think that if Hezbollah cannot, for the foreseeable future, play that role in the Iranian deterrence and defense strategy, how are they going to deter and defend themselves? One is to be cautious. I think they will be cautious, very cautious in the coming period. But two is maybe to look at the kind of that there is survival of their survival at stake, and they look at their nuclear program in a new and urgent way. And so they face difficult choices. It also depends on what Israel does. That's why the administration in the United States is pushing for a ceasefire in Lebanon to get some understanding between Israel and Hezbollah and others about the return of the Israelis back to the areas near the Lebanese border to avoid escalation. But I think we are in a very, very sensitive and transforming period in the Middle East.
Right. The fact that we are talking about Iran again, October 7th, the October 7th attack really put a lot of questions on Mossad's intelligence capability, intelligence gathering methods, so on and so forth. And following that, we've seen a spate of attacks. Israel has taken down the top leadership of almost all proxies of Iran. In such a scenario, how does one assess the IRGC? Is the Iranian intelligence that also has been hailed in the past a myth?
Right. Well, of course, Israel has had both intelligence failure, October 7th, and recently had big intelligence successes. So, we're now dealing with the consequences of the success, and what does Israel do with going forward, and the implications of those successes for others. Yes, I think it's likely that the IRGC doesn't look as formidable at this moment as it did a while back. I'm sure there is a lot of assessments and reassessment about what has gone wrong. But sometimes failure can lead to decisions that, for the side that is successful, can create new and even bigger challenges. If, as a result of all this, you get a nuclear weapon, Iran, or in the process of trying to get to a nuclear weapons capability, you get a conflict because a decision is made, if assuming one knows where exactly Iran is with regard to decisions and capabilities, you could get to a bigger conflict as a result, because several countries have said they would not accept or allow Iran from possessing nuclear weapons. So you've got a very delicate and difficult and risky set of circumstances right now.
But is this a race against time? Do you think Iran has the capability to reach that enrichment levels for a nuclear weapon? And is that the biggest threat for Israel? Do they have it in them?
Well, based on what's available publicly, it looks like that Iran has the capability and is accumulating fissile material, highly enriched uranium, to produce one or more bombs. or at least it's very close to it. It's a matter of days, if not shorter than that in terms of hours. So there is a set of circumstances in which they have the fissile material, they probably have the bomb design, they may have the fuses needed, and what may be needed is a decision by the leadership that the circumstances are such that they must pursue this option. And as I said, I don't think they've necessarily made that decision, but I believe that in the circumstances that they are in, and looking at options as they must be doing, given what's going on, this could very well be one of the options.
What is Iran's biggest reluctance right now? The fact that they're not nuclear, or the fact that should they enter the fray, that their oil infrastructure and their port infrastructure will take a huge hit from Israel? And should that happen, it'll cripple Iran completely.
Well, yeah, those you are pointing to even more risks than the leadership risk that it faces, and in their analysis and consideration of options, in my judgment, protecting the leadership ranks at the very top of their concerns right now. Avoiding, or if they cannot avoid an Israeli attack against them, surviving that attack. I think they will be very cautious not to be provocative at this time. But it also depends what Israel decides to do. Does it see this as a moment of opportunity to degrade Iran as well? Or is it that it leaves the future of Iran to be decided by the Iranian people, and is satisfied that it established deterrence and stay with that? I think this is, in the coming few days, this is one of the big issues.
Ambassador Khalilzad, you, again, because you spoke about Iran and the people of Iran, what was interesting is also not just the military strategies, but the geopolitics and the politics at play over here. Prime Minister Netanyahu delivered an address to the people of Iran, and he's called for the freedom of Iran, and has asked people, because there is a massive resistance that's happening within Iran itself. So he's not just playing to what his military strengths are, he's also playing to what he can drive or derive from the resistance that's ongoing within Iran.
Right. Yes. Of course, I believe that the regime in Iran is not extremely popular. Even the president of Iran, Dr. Pezeshkian, said 60% of the people didn't vote in the last election, and that's not a good sign. It was a kind of admission of the unpopularity of the regime. Iran is a very developed society. The Iranians have inherited, a great civilization, very important culturally. They deserve, in my personal judgment, a better system of government than they have. But that's for them to decide, and for Israel to associate itself with the people's aspiration in Iran for a better system. That's smart, but the question is, it just stays rhetorical, support for the greatness of Iranian people and their potential, or does it take military action? I don't think Israel is in a position to take the kind of military action that we took in Afghanistan or Iraq to change regimes. But we've learned some lessons from that ourselves too. The unintended consequence of your desires and the challenges and difficulties of transforming another country, and Iran is a country of obviously very huge with massive population of almost 100 million. So that's why I emphasize what decisions that Israel make and what Iran does. These are momentous days that the region faces, and decisions made would have long-term consequences, not only for the people of each of those countries, but for the region and for the entire world.
In one of your posts, you've written that the new U.S. administration must be ready on day one with a plan. The opportunity will not last indefinitely. If you could elaborate.
Right. Well, that's true. As I said to you before, a lot of people thought when the new administration comes, it will be focused on China immediately. What to do about Taiwan? Well, China is obviously important, although its recent developments in its economy leads one to think that maybe the threat isn't going to grow as rapidly as one assumed, but nevertheless, it will be a very substantial player that one has to watch in terms of a balance of power. But I think the urgent issues are likely to be now come from Iran and the Middle East, and then Ukraine certainly remains an urgent issue. We saw the Austrian election yesterday that produced a party that's the largest now became, which just would want a change in the policy of Europe towards Ukraine.
Right. So, Ambassador Khalilzad, do you think that if U.S. enters the fray directly, should Israel need it, do you think Russia and China will also be a part of the war then to help Iran? Or is it too far-fetched?
Well, you know, Russia and China have strong relationship with Iran, and so they would be also concerned about what happens to Iran and in the region. Chinese interest in the region is growing. It's been more active recently, economically and otherwise in the region. But I believe that the U.S. is uniquely, its role is important because of its relations with Israel, which is now a key player in deciding what happens next, but also with the other states, the Gulf states of the area, and the U.S. has the relevant military capabilities in the theater and has been enhancing it in recent days. So there will be big power implications for these developments, no doubt. And India, I'm sure, is also watching the situation closely, given its growing role and influence. Recently, there was a India GCC ministerial. That's another indication of India's growing.
Can India play a role? Can India play a role over here, an effective one at that?
Well, India has relations also with Israel, as well as with Iran and the states of the region. Although recently there was a spat about Ayatollah Khamenei's concern about the treatment of Muslims in India that led to a reaction. But I think India, Russia, and China can play a role. But I think it's the U.S. role that is in the immediate future is the most important. And relations, unfortunately, between the U.S., Russia, is very difficult at this time because of Russian actions in Ukraine. And room for something joint seems unlikely given the polarization and as it occurred. But with China, with India, I believe that there is more room for the U.S. Engagement and potential cooperation.
Right. I know you have to go, but my final question to you, Ambassador Khalilzad, my final question to you is that we're seeing a lot of conflicts, a lot of wars. And in all this, we're seeing that nobody's actually listening to the United States of America. Is America's power diminishing? Is America no longer a superpower that it used to be, where people would, or countries would pay heed to what DC is saying? That no longer is the case.
Well, I think that the importance of U.S. Leadership and decision-making is because of relative U.S. power, both military, economic, and geopolitical. It hasn't been exercised as that role or that power. So it really is a challenge for the new administration how to enhance the credibility of U.S. decisions and the consequences of not reacting appropriately to U.S. Decisions or U.S. Demands or U.S. Requests. And I think that at this point, particularly because an election is coming, perhaps some leaders who are going to be waiting for see what happens in the United States next after the coming election.
Okay. On that note, Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad, thank you so much for joining us here on the Indian Network.
Very nice to be with you. Thank you.